So I recommend for you to have the introduction to psychospiritual emotional psych introduction to psycho-emotional spiritual therapeutic somatic work document out. I'm I don't think I'm going to share it just so that I can see the chat in case you drop anything in the chat. So please do. And it just feels a bit better for me. Okay, so you've all got the document, haven't you? Great. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to my intention is to sort of skim through this and get more to the framework for connecting with guides, ancestors, and spiritual allies, because that's the bit that I want to focus on the most. But I just want to make sure with this first document um, that um, that you guys have this and you feel that you can use it for your own self-reflection. Because I feel like the invitation here is this isn't a full training, but this is a professional development. The impetus is really on you having something, a framework or frameworks to guide you that can then give you a point of self-reflection to identify where you may want to study more or get more supervision or learn new skills. And for sure, this in itself is going to be sharing some of those skills with you um, so that you feel more prepared to do this work. Okay. But what I'm inviting is for you to tune into what might be your comfortable next step for you to deepen into this kind of work. And the thing that really fascinated about me about this and about our conversation we had before was this whole thing of accessibility, framing the journey, making it relatable to our clients. Because I feel that there's so much more potential when our clients are and actively involved in the process rather than it's happening and they're just kind of on the journey and maybe not as aware. And this is something that we have to gauge for ourselves. We've got to, oh God, this thing isn't even anywhere near me. Um, we've got to gauge for ourselves. And so we've got to gauge for ourselves where our clients are at and what's appropriate for them and for their journey. I always spend time in those initial conversations that I would particularly my discovery call, but then the initial consultation, I find out, which I'm sure you will do, what kind of work they've done before, what kind of journeying work they've done before. Have they done inner processing work? That's probably the most neutral way to frame things. And it's really about you being really sensitive and mindful of that language, gauging initially who the person is, what's been their experience, and then gauging how to start to gently use that language. Are you used to doing emotional processing work or inner journeying work? And from that, starting to find out from them what worked, what didn't work, what did you find useful, what didn't you find useful, and just see as you start to uncover what their aims and objectives and desired outcome is as you do that future pacing that we were speaking about before. That's your in. That's your in to say, well, would it be useful for you in that case? I've really heard what you shared about what your desired outcome is, that you'd really love to improve your relationship with your mother. And I'm really hearing that there was a lot in the way of that relationship, and it was really difficult for you growing up. And your mother seemed to you very emotionally unavailable. And so whilst I'm hearing that you really want to improve this relationship, there may be some inner journeying work there for you to do with relation to how that's impacted your system, but also where there might be some connection between you and maybe some of what your mother's gone through. Would you be willing or would you be interested in doing some of this inner journeying work to process us and work through it? Yes, great. Okay. And then you just that desire for willingness there through reflecting back to them and then being like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Well, if I want to do that, then yeah, I will do the inner emotioning work. And then it's like you've opened one door and you're like, great, okay. So tell me more about what you noticed what you noticed about your mother or your relationship with your mother. This might be in subsequent sessions, this might be there. That might start to uncover things, patterns, links to ancestral patterns. You can open up those questions. Oh, and so do you think that there was any link there? Where did that come from in your mother? Well, my mother had a really terrible upbringing. Ah, okay, immediately. So we start to get really sharp. Doing this work really requires us to be able to sit back, to go into the deepest, most acutely aware, tuned state of listening. That is what this is all about. Because it's in the little things that they say, the little observations they make about their world, their cycles, their relationships, where that's the golden nugget. Oh, well, my mum had a terrible upbringing and she's just projecting that all over me. Straight away, that person is blended, is really upset about that, and hasn't come to being able to maybe cultivate the awareness and compassion for their mother because their mother went through a really tough time. And so that inner journeying, this is like, okay, I'm really hearing that, reflecting that back. I'm really hearing that. Well, some of this processing work can help us. And perhaps along the way, you might identify where some of the energy of your ancestors has kind of is influencing your mother and you. There may be some burdens that your ancestors are carrying that may be coming into your family relationships. And sometimes even just bringing awareness to that again is like can open up these conversations. So it's how we frame, it's how we make this accessible and relatable and relevant for them, depending on their intentions, and then helping them to understand, and this again relates to this accessibility, what parts, what protectors are gatekeeping or blocking them from going deeper into this. Because so much of our work actually really needs to begin with resourcing. And maybe that's all some of you are going to be doing with your clients. They may then go on to work with other people. They may then continue to work with you. But if you know, this is why the package thing is really important because it's like you've almost got to make an assessment with your client. Like, okay, they want to go into that deep womb work, into that space. And the potential is for them to really, and they've had sexual trauma, but it's so dangerous for them to go into that womb space, right? So then it may be that a lot of resourcing their parts is needed, right? They have a lot of protectors. Maybe you are used to jumping into a womb work session with them, but maybe, just maybe, you might think differently now about how you structure your sessions and what you offer your clients to help them prepare for that deep dive work and get the most out of that. And being able to confidently say that to your clients, I really think that 3 sessions will be like a good starting point for us to prepare your system for that really deep dive work we're going to do, going into the womb and doing some energy work, clearing, shamanic journeying, And for you to then start to really tap in and hear and connect with and hear the wisdom of your womb. I really want to help you get there. But what I'm hearing from you is that there are some protectors around that are holding the barriers up, that think that it concerned it might be dangerous. So we've got to do a little bit of work with them and resource them and reassure them that we can do this work safely. So then the potential for these expanded states of consciousness, for the channeling, which is where we're actively tapping into that intuition of our guides, of our higher self, where we're receiving the messages, how empowering that is for our clients. And how I know we all want that for them. We want them to go and into the inner chambers of their heart and meet their guides. But some of them just really have just got a lot of protection around. And so if we can slow down, if we can help them see, if we all slow down together, and this is the tricky thing, because what you're saying is if you just pay me to do more sessions, you can get to the deeper place. And I know how I get that. I get that we have parts that find that really difficult, really challenging. And so maybe your work isn't about getting better at doing your shamanic work. Maybe you're like me, and my gifts just came in like really quickly and really fast, like whenever I needed them. And actually the work that I had to do was more in my own blocks that I had around telling my clients what I felt was the best thing for them. If you want to get to that point, if you want to do that deep dive mushroom journey, you want me to take a huge risk, and you can apply this to any work that you do, whether it's the sexuality work, the herbalism work, the womb work, anything else. If you want me to take a massive risk to hold a space to do this interdimensional spirit work that I'm putting myself at risk for, because I have to deal with then you and your dysregulated system, or whatever else comes up. If you want me to take that risk, this is what I feel is going to be the best thing to safeguard you and me in this process. And that is that we do more preparation work, that we do more psychospiritual work in preparation, and we do this particular type of work. This is where my expertise comes in. And I believe that doing parts work with the body, energy work with the body, and doing a cacao ceremony preparation for the deep dive womb thing, that's what I believe will prepare and resource you to be able to get the most out of those sessions and meet your guides. I'm just going to pause there and just see how that's landing with all of you. This perspective of what's possible.
I mean, what I'm thinking about with the current frameworks that I'm working with is like I'm working with the journey at the moment, and I've noticed this time around, even though I have quite an extensive intake process with a real long form with lots of juicy questions on, which we then speak about in the opening ceremony, I still feel like it's not enough actually time, and I wonder if the whole first module could be setting up for the journey, like, preparing them, resourcing them, talking about what's in the way, really speaking about their current state and where they've come from, beyond just conditioning and history, which it is, but more like really like what's going on now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's really, I think what you're saying that's really speaking to me is the slowing down, like really, really extracting the process and being like, right, what are we actually working with here?
Yeah. Mm. And you're really great, Ria, with like workbooks and things. I'm terrible with all that kind of stuff. But like having the accompanying journaling workbook to go along with it, having all the accompanying practices to go along with it and stuff like that. Because it's a slowing down, but it's not the old mindset of mine is like, oh, slowing down equals to um like less value. Like we're slowing down, they're not going to get as much out of it. It's gonna be more basic. That's what it brings up for me when you say slowing down. And like I'm noticing that like there was that because I noticed those parts and I noticed the correction that was going on in the background, like the parts correcting the other parts, going, well, no, that's not what it means. And it's really interesting that, isn't it? Because there are these like old paradigms and belief systems that actually probably in the background are really like preventing us also from like putting these things in place because we have these old belief systems. So I invite all of you to also, this is again another place to look at what parts, what beliefs are you holding, what concerns are your parts holding in having this approach of like, let's really slow down, let's really spend the time resourcing, let's do more sessions. What's stopping you from saying to your clients, I do minimum 6 sessions only? And I'm curious now, I'm curious maybe with you, Ria, or anybody else, like, is like just even with the example you gave me there, Ria, of like what might be good for like an upgrade of your system there. Do you notice any parts resistant or parts around or activated or concerned about if you were to implement this, like what might happen or an impact or a potential risk or anything like that?
Not so much. I think it sounds really positive. I think that it's a good idea. But I also have noticed, especially with a couple of, maybe there's one client that's on the journey at the moment, a specific person who I would consider to be someone that I think is quite cool. And someone that also is like in the world of, they're a breathwork facilitator. So I think that there's parts of me that want to make sure that she specifically feels like she's getting her money's worth. So I noticed in the first session, again, it's a toss up between like being adaptive to what she's bringing. And I asked her, do you want to work on this, what's coming up now, or do you want to go with what we were doing in the first module? And she was like, I want to work with what's coming up now. But also then potentially it's missing out on the structure of the journey that I've created for a purpose.
Yes.
So I think that's also but it's such a balance because it's like I do want to be
Hmm.
adaptive and I want to work with what they want to work with, and also there's a process that I've created, you know. So
Hmm.
that's the only parts that I feel like are around with this, but also in general with this topic.
So, just a direct question for you and everybody else to kind of track in your own system as well and answer this in your own system. Have you ever had a conversation like in that sort of situation with your client where you pause and say, I just have to speak for my own parts here? And then share and then share, I really have a part around that is that really wants you to get the most out of this and is like really all of that stuff and then I have this like real self-led desire also that the power and the structure that we've created and just being mindful to not move out of module 1 until we're absolutely sure that this has been covered and we've gotten the most out of it. I'm just putting that on the table and I'm really curious to see how that lands with you and if you feel that there's any value in what I've shared, something along those lines. And how would that be?
The only time I've really done this is when I've noticed parts come up that yeah, things like I'm noticing that my big sister parts are coming in that want to protect you, and I just want to speak to that. That energy is there for me. I think one to speak to it, but two also it's just nice to name the dynamic that could potentially be in the space. But I've never applied it to this specific. I think I do a lot of checking in, like, is this definitely what you want to be speaking about this session? But I think maybe the under the foundational thing of like, and also I've created something here. That feels edgy. That feels edgy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is edgy. Very courageous. So I had this like really super transformational supervision session, and it cleared these burdens that these exiles of mine were holding, that then allowed me to have the self-led confidence to just be really honest with my clients about parts that are coming up for me. And I tend to do that now whenever it needs. When I can feel a part of me is like really pushing through, and it's like, no, but we should do this. I speak for it. And once I started doing that, I got more confidence because my system could see that it was not only it was safe for me to speak for my parts, but my clients loved it. They were like, "Oh my God, you're a real person." And like, "Oh my gosh, like you have parts." And they just feel like the relationship is so genuine. And I've had so many people that have come back that have just said, literally, this is exactly what I'm looking for, because the other person that I worked with was like really clinical and it just wasn't for me. And I have had some people, have had a couple of people that have gone the other way and have said that it's too interpersonal and they're not interested in hearing about my parts at all. And they don't want to hear when they don't want me to say, yeah, I've had a really great day today. They don't want to know anything about me. They just want to go straight to the session. And even then, I've had the courage to say to those people, well, I really hear you, and I really would love to to find a way to balance our parts. But I just like want you to know that I have parts that feel that this interpersonal aspect of our relationship is really, really important for me and for the therapeutic process. And so, like, I hear what you're saying, and I'll rein it in a little bit, but this is who I am, and this is what you're getting. So, you know, and so coming back to the therapeutic session, having the confidence to speak for your parts and just name it as that rather than, because it's so much more relaxing for my system now rather than like my parts are so resistant to saying, well, I really think that we should go back and we should focus on that thing. Like my parts will never do that. But what they will do, because I even was trained as a coach, like you never do that. It's so strict, right? You guys have been through some of that training with me. But my parts do feel totally fine with is speaking for them and saying, I've got a part that really wants to do this. I hear your part really wants to do that. I'm really open. What do you think? That's literally what we're doing. And then they just go, oh, okay, well, we can have a beautiful discussion about it. And so I really implore you, this is a very important technique to integrate into your practice. And once you do it once, you will do it again at your next set. Your parts will want to do it. You'll find that your parts wanna be honest with your clients, want to speak for them being around, that you no longer actually have to suppress your parts. And there's a balance. Like I'm not telling you to like all constantly be telling your clients what your parts are up to. Like, no way. That's not what I'm saying, obviously.
Oh, my parts are so annoyed that you keep talking about this thing. God, my parts need to fucking shut up.
My parts just want you to fucking shut up, man.
Just letting you know for honesty's sake.
So funny. Yeah. So you guys get where I'm going with this. Great. Any questions or reflections on that? Because that itself is a really, I'm throwing that out there and I'm telling you it's possible, but that in itself is a whole, like that in itself is a whole class and a whole set of skills of like how you speak for your parts in the presence of your clients. So yeah, anything on this before we
So
move
could
on?
I just sort of sound something out to see
Yeah.
if it's landing correctly with me? So say for example, I was in a one-on-one session with somebody and there's like some resistance to a suggestion I've made about some like nutritional protocol. So that's happened to me before. Could I just sort of softly interject and say, you know, can I share something? I'd like to share something that's coming up with my parts. And then I would then reflect that my parts are noticing there's some resistance there. Would you like to explore that a little bit more?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's a useful way of doing it, looking into the IFS model, because it kind of diffuses the personal, emotional kind of element of that.
Yeah. And that's such a beautiful example. My parts are really noticing that resistance. My parts are really resonating with that resistance as
Yeah, so I
well.
guess like from the types of exercises you shared before, you could then go on to, hearing what they have to say, and then, saying like, how does that feel to share that, and to feel that, recognize that. Does it
Exactly.
feel safe to explore some more around that?
Hmm.
So actually, just what you were saying, I think Cal mentioned as well about the slowing down, that could then sort of course correct that entire session, perhaps, to just getting them to acknowledge what the resistance is and kind of break down the hard walls around
Exactly.
it,
Mm.
so that they also get a more embodied
Mhm.
experience, not just you.
Mhm. Yeah,
Mm.
because how do we deal with those situations where our clients, like Raquel was beautifully explaining at the beginning, I don't know if you were there, Nadine, but those situations where you've got a whole beautiful shamanic journey planned, you've got a whole beautiful Blue Lotus ceremony planned, and our own parts, our own minds, creating this whole amazing magical potential in our minds of what it's going to be like for them and how refreshed and enlightened they're going to be. And then we get into the journey and they're just like, they're not able to connect to their guides. Like they didn't see anything, like they couldn't, couldn't go to those depths. It's really getting curious in advance around what could be resisting, they could be resisting, what could be in the way of them going deep into that journey, what is unsafe for them. And having just a million ways, easy ways into opening this is just really, it's preparing ourselves and preparing them. Okay, anything else?
Yeah, just one question that's sort of
Yeah.
adjacent. Um, I wonder, like, mm, I wonder how necessary, or I mean, you're specifically an IFS therapist, so it's different, but how necessary do you think that it is to share with people the outline of the IFS model?
Um, it depends on the context, but if you're using it in your practice, specifically in a structured way in your coaching sessions, you're using some of the IFS model and you're doing the 6 Fs, then I think it's really useful to share that with clients. I think it's useful. You know your audience better than anyone else. You're the expert there. So tuning into what is the best way to deliver that, like maybe like a 10-minute video presentation or a little guide or something that you're like, please watch this before we begin, or, whatever, that just sets that up for them, that is that as part of this journey. Well, kind of what we could be saying is that there's a little bit of an expectation that we're going to do this kind of intimate inner relating. I'm just going to prepare you for it a little bit. It's about embodiment, like maybe doing a 15-minute video on what is embodiment, and within that, breaking some of these things down.
Yeah, it's helpful. Thank you.
Because I do see these things as the broader underlying um term is embodiment for me, embodied practice. The deeper underlying outcome is embodiment and a greater depth of embodiment. Embodied self-leadership, embodied sovereign self-leadership, whatever it is, right? But it's about becoming aware and in my body, feeling it, connecting from the inside, not just connecting to my body as my body, connecting to my environment around me, nature, my guide, like, because the guides and the plant allies, that's all further down the line. But also, for some people, can be the interface for them. You know, like connecting with trees can be safer to them than connecting with their bodies because the trees have been such a stable resource for them. It's been that was where they went to, the tree at the bottom of the garden. Like, so for so many of my clients in sessions, when we either have to call on their guides because they're really struggling, or they have a big breakthrough and they have a guide appear, that often happens. A lot of the time it's trees, oak trees, rowan trees, you know? And so that could be their way in, drinking cedar tea, drinking, you know, the herbs or teas of particular plants or flowers that they really connect with, asking them, what is that for you? Bringing that into session. It's all about that greater, whatever it is that's going to get them into a deeper state of embodiment so that inner dimensional journeying can take place. That's what's yours to curate now. That's the journey for you to curate. Okay, anything else?
It's just a reflection that I guess this is where I mean I see why you've been bringing in the coaching and IFS because it almost seems like almost fundamental pathways to get to that embodiment in a way to help the client get to that embodiment. And I'm just realizing I'm like, I mean, I've been having that desire of working with clients for in a container, and I'm actually just embarking on the first one, and I had, prepare a questionnaire, and I had a sort of pre, you know, journey set, and we have 5 weeks together, and I'm actually realizing that just based on what we've journeyed so far, there might not be much else that we can do together other than that journey of stabilizing, or just literally like, can this person just feel a little bit more trusted and connected? And if that happens, that's kind of enough, really.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this thing in sort of traditional psychotherapy, which I think is really great to bring into psychospiritual work. So remember, there's overlaps, right? There's a lot of techniques that we use within psychospiritual work that are just from traditional psychotherapy or energy work or whatever it is. It really crosses, this is really the bridge between all modalities. And there's this thing that's called titration. And titration is, have you heard of it before? The titration, yeah. So it's like you're kind of you're like dipping in and out of those deep processes. It's like, like dip a toe in and do a little bit of that, but pull them out before they're getting into the exile, essentially. Put them back into a process, pull them out before they get to the exile, put them back. It's like just dipping the toe in and getting used to the temperature of the water. And that titration process is a conditioning process that really does work. And like you're saying, like sometimes like that is just enough. We've really got to get confident and to make peace with the fact that with some of our clients, like this is the huge power and potential for them is in this really tiny little piece of work over here, but the power and potential is massive for them because it's relative to what they've been suffering with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great video. I think there's many videos out there. I've been really like educating myself a lot into somatic experiencing because it really is a modality that speaks to me, and hope that at some point I can do the training. But I've watched many videos of Peter Levine, and he uses this toy to explain the titration process, and it's if I find it, I'll share it because it's really like it really speaks to me. I went to do like an introductory weekend a couple of years ago, and that's the whole thing, you know, like the somatic experiencing modality is that, which is the same thing as, you know, a stabilization and as resourcing, really, that like we're supporting someone to expand their own window of tolerance, you know, the window of tolerance of their own nervous system that's gone completely out of, you know, what they could do. Like they speak about like something happens too fast, too soon, too much, you know, and the
That's
system
it.
just like bong, and it's like now it just doesn't really know how to come into that sort of window. And I find all of that is, you know, it just makes so much sense in my own system, in my own experience, that it feels like for me right now, that's like almost like quite fundamental. So I find this class quite helpful to be like not letting my parts trying to like impose or lead, or rather than like, you know, can we just, you know, work on this resourcing and stabilizing it. So much more powerful than trying. Yeah. It's like I see myself when I've pushed through my own system, you know, to try to get to deeper places, and then I wasn't really quite ready to go there. And yeah.
So what this is bringing up for me is just the circling back round to Ria's question at the beginning about shame and guilt and these heavier emotions and how we work with this safely. And the titration technique is really great for working with guilt and shame, and ultimately working with guilt and shame. Um, you know, this psycho-spiritual, psycho-emotional, spiritual process work lends itself really, really well to working with these heavier burdens, simply because within the context of doing this psycho-spiritual work, the potential for grounding, stabilization, resourcing is so much more, I believe, because we're able to bring in many more modalities. I think that's the big plus point for me with psychospiritual work is just that we're able to bring in so many more tools and techniques. Like just simply psychological processing is just like, you know, clinical psychology or whatever it is that we're using coaching. It's very single focused. Whereas we could bring in various tools here to help our clients to do the work that they're doing, the inner processing work. And so that's something for contemplation, is like, you know, what disciplines are you bridging, as I've got here, or merging, um, and and how, and when do you combine modalities? The art of it is really something to sharpen up and practice skills around. So maybe, Ria, this is something for you to practice your skills with somebody around how you work with shame and guilt in the body. One of the examples of doing this work with parts and then titration work is simply to really name it, really name that to the client, like the potential of this work is for us to be able to for me to be able to support you to to be able to work with that shame and guilt in a way that feels safe for you and that is appropriate for you. I'm hearing that you really want to clear it and you really want to be free of it. And I think I can help you with some of that work. And it may be that you need to work with another practitioner, um, such as an IFS practitioner, to do a bit of processing work around it. But what we can do is we can try some methods to help resource you to get to that place. And in doing so, help to access some of that. And so then your first step is actually to resource the client and get them to understand that the way that you're going to be able to heal is by being with the shame and guilt. It's really educated. The psychoeducation is really, really important here. And I think you spoke to that before, right? Ria, is psychoeducation and how we bring this to our clients. Because what we're doing here is we are speaking to their parts to prepare them for where we're going on the journey. Yeah. And being explicit about the potential to be with heavy emotions. Right? So that bit of psychoeducation is everything because you've not had to do any therapeutic work. You've not had to, like, your parts haven't had to get worried, like, oh God, can we do this? You're literally just explaining this. That if we can prepare your parts, the potential is that you can really go in and be with some of these heavy emotions that you've been speaking to. But what we're going to do is we're going to take it really slow over these 3 or 4 sessions, and we're just going to prepare and resource and see if we can recondition your part, your system, to being able to just be with a little bit of that. And then what you do is you can bring in some of those titration tools, with the inner shamanic journeying or the energy work. If the heavy emotions come up, just ask, is it okay to be with this? Yeah, it is. Okay, great. So what I'm going to recommend that you do is that you just visualize or feel where that emotion is, where that shame is sitting. And I want you to put a bubble around it. And what you're going to do is this bubble is going to protect any parts of you that are feeling really vulnerable or tender or really concerned about the heaviness of this emotion. And what you're going to do is we're just a little bit at a time. We're just going to see if your parts can just relax back and let you just be with that emotion for just 20 seconds. And then what we're going to do is we're going to close that bubble back up again. These are all, I could give you 1,000 examples right now of these internal visualizations that you could do around this sort of thing. But I'm not going to bother because we'll just be here all day. You don't need me to tell you these, that they will come to you in the moment. You will be there with your client in the moment. And if you are self-led and your system has the confidence and your client's in there and there's the potential for them to be with their shame, you will just channel your own process in that moment. You'll just keep it, okay, what are you feeling? I'm just feeling like this heavy shame and I'm just feeling it over here. Keep checking in with them. Is it okay? Yeah. How okay is it on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 being the most okay. Oh, it's 6. Okay, what do we need to do to get it to 7 or 8? Do you need any reassurance? Should we get some more anchoring into the earth, some more connection to self? Like, I just literally made that up just now, right? I just made up that internal process just now. And you can do the same, and it's totally appropriate. This is how all of the processes have been developed, but it requires you to be in self because you're not going to make something up when you're not in self. Your parts just aren't going to do it. They're just going to be like freaking out, right? So when you're in self, that energy is not there. it just comes to you and you just go, oh, okay, so okay, that shame's too much. Okay, let's wrap it up in a bubble and seal it all up in the protection pyramid. Remember the protection pyramid from the beginning of the journey? I want you to just seal it in the protection pyramid right now. I'm here, right here with you. Take some deep breaths, connect into your roots. There's so many ways that you can ground that person to to create, if they're really feeling the overwhelm, to come out of that overwhelm of that heavy emotion. Check in. Okay, how was that? Is that okay? Right? Is it okay for it to just being around it, even just being around the energy and then go back in? There's so many different ways that you can do it because everybody relates into their inner dimension in a different way. We all have to go and gauge and understand how each of our clients, how they interface with their inner world. And what we've got to do is kind of go in and meet and like just work with how they work with their inner system, if you guys get what I mean. I think this is the most challenging bit for me to teach, is how to go in and learn how your client interfaces with their internal system so that you can adapt to that and help to guide them. And it's even more challenging when they don't know how they interface with their own system. So you're learning as you're guiding them to figure that out, and then you're learning at the same time. Go on, Raquel.
Got a question arising from that. I guess, because you've got like such a big experience with that, do you notice that there is generally like specific amount of time that it takes you to understand that from a client? Like, does it normally take like 1, 2 sessions, or does it change client to client?
It does change, of course, client to client, but generally speaking, if I'm really on it and asking questions, getting feedback, trying things, it's a really great question. Such good reflection for me. But yeah, I mean, it's the big number that's jumping out to me is it's at least 3 sessions.
Mm.
Because understanding how somebody interfaces with their system requires quite a few questions. And this is something that I will create a protocol for at some time in the future with all the questions. But the questions you want to ask are very somatic, like a very kind of, you can use the way your own mind works, because it's about you understanding how they're interfacing so that you can then understand how to guide them better. So you want to be asking them questions like, so just let me know, like you want to know, are they feeling? Are they like, how are they sensing? Is it that they're feeling sensations? Is it that they're coming up as thoughts? Like when they're sensing parts, I'll say, and how are you sensing that part? So that I get an idea if they say I can feel it in my body or I'm hearing a thought. Or I might say, I'd like you to I might even just ask them outright specific questions at the end of the session. Like, was that very visual for you? Was that very somatic for you? Could you feel sensations in your body? And then they'll just tell you what that was like for you. And it may change. That's why then it changes the next session. And you see a different way that they're interfacing with a different set of parts. Because that's the thing. Just because they're interfacing with parts in this way doesn't mean that it's going to be exactly the same with the other way. So, for example, they might interface with a set of parts and they might hear thoughts, and it's like parts talking directly to them. It's very like audio. But then there might be other parts that are very young parts that were very like embedded in the nervous system, like pre-verbal. And you don't see those parts and you don't hear those parts. Like they're felt in the body. So yeah, 3 sessions gives you a good amount of time to get a sense of how they're interfacing with their internal world.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Okay. So let's take a quick comfort 6 minute, 7 minute break, and then come back for the very last portion of the day, the weekend. All righty. See you then.